go. I was waiting for that. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for being here. Thanks for coming back. This is, or maybe it's your first time. This is session 2 of our Microsoft Excel training. For those of you who may have missed Monday, my name is Adam Jesperson. I'm with the Montana Nonprofit Association. Eastern Plains is a member of ours, and we've done some work together. And I was brought in to provide some content training on Microsoft Excel. So really, I have no presentation tonight except just to dive back into Excel and start going over the work that you saw from that agenda and continue moving forward. We're going to review a little bit of what we talked about with session 1, and I didn't get any sort of use cases or questions from Dara that were just submitted by you all for things that you would like to see, things that you would like to have done in the next hour and a half. So we're going to move forward, but as we're moving through this, I want to make sure that I think tonight might feel a little bit faster just because we're dealing with a little bit more advanced topics. I'm going to go as slow as I can and be as deliberate with this as I can. But if you are not keeping up, or if you have a question, or if there's something that's not making sense to you, please, please, please put it in the chat or unmute yourself and yell, or whatever it's going to take to say, can you go back and touch on this? Or whatever it might be, or bring up whatever question you have as we go through this. We want to make sure that this is useful for you. Again, this session is going to be recorded. The exercise file that we are working off of is a continuation of where we stopped last time. So you should all have that file. Dara, it might be helpful if you could put that in the chat again, if that's possible. And then after tonight, I'm going to send the completed file, which I'm going to be building during this session, to Dara to send out to all of the attendees and registrants from this course. So you have the recordings, you'll have the beginning exercise file as a sandbox to play in and make mistakes, and we have the completed file to compare that to. And she has put the exercise file in the chat, so feel free to open that if you would like. And you can use that if you'd like to have a second screen or a split screen up as we're walking through this. Unless there are any questions or any other housekeeping that I'm missing, I'm going to share my screen and we're going to jump into tonight's topic, tonight's content. All right, you should all now be seeing our Excel workbook, our exercise file. And hopefully it's large enough for everyone to be able to read. So you can see the agenda that we had from session 1. We talked about just the general structure of an Excel workbook. So we talked about worksheets, workbooks, tabs. We talked about the grid structure of an Excel workbook. So our rows, our columns, and our cells, and how formulas especially it's important to know those cell references. We talked about relative references versus absolute references as we're building functions and formulas. We're going to continue that again tonight, and adding those dollar signs before row and column monikers or references to turn a relative reference into an absolute reference. We looked at our master list and we talked about how to format that list in a way that was going to make it easier to read and easier to manipulate. So we talked about expanding and contracting column widths. We talked about freezing panes so that you can see your titles and your headers as you scroll down. Freezing columns so you can see that name or that important column as you scroll to the right. And we talked about just general formatting, bold, italics, underlined, changing the cell type within a cell, so making it a date, making it currency, making it a number, leaving it as general text, stuff like that. And then we dug into functions, and we introduced a couple functions that were pretty basic, sum, average. Then we ended the night with if, and a single argument if statement, and then a multiple argument if statements. Those are pretty foundational functions, and you'll see the work that we're going to do pretty early tonight is alterations of that if function that allows us to do some other things, and they're pretty straightforward to use, but they're built off of that if architecture, that if algorithm. And that's where we ended up. We talked about order of operations. Remember PEMBAS, parentheses, exponent, multiply, divide, add, subtract, in that order, and how that's important as we're building functions to keep that order of operations in our mind, to make sure we're putting in the right parentheses, so that we get the results that we want. Remember, we have our shortcut keys. I'm going to bring those up quick. So these are shortcut keys that you can use as you get more comfortable with Excel that will help you move a little bit faster, save a little bit of time. If you're doing the same thing over and over and over again, sometimes a shortcut key can save a significant amount of time. This is our master list example, which we're going to come back to tonight. Remember, we talked about filtering, being able to filter and sort. We've got our frozen panes so we can scroll and be able to see everything that we need to see. And then our intro to our functions. And here's where we finished last time. We built our little budget right here and worked on our date formatting, built our sum formula, our average formula. Here's what we talked about: relative versus absolute references. Remember, our absolute references get the dollar signs, relative references don't. And then we finished with our if statements. All right. Tonight, we're going to start with some text-based functions. And so this is, I see these used a lot. I use them a lot. You know, most of us in the work that we do, we deal with lists. We deal with client lists, sales transaction lists, sales lists, that mailing lists of all kinds and shapes and sorts and sizes. Most of those have some sort of text within them, right? And not just numbers, but names, addresses, city, state, zip, that kind of stuff. And sometimes being able to manipulate that text is very helpful, especially when you have a larger list and you want to sort it a certain way or break it up in a certain way. We're going to do some functions that allow you to manipulate text that maybe can speed up your work as you're working with lists. They're listed across the top here. These are the ones that we're going to go into. We're going to go one at a time. So the first one is called left. So these first two, they're called left and right, which they're pretty self-explanatory when you know what they do. The left function allows you to tell Excel, I want you to look into another cell, and I want you to start on the left side, count a certain number of characters, and return those characters into a new cell. So my example here is I have a zip code. I have a zip code with the 5 digits and then the 4 digits on the end. And I want to create a column that just has the 5-digit zip codes. So to do that, remember, we're going to use our formula builder up here, our little function builder up here. To start this is our wizard. I'm going to click that. It's going to bring up my formula builder on the right side. If you're on a PC, that's going to show up as a call out box right in the middle of your screen. And I know the function I want to use, and it's called left. So in my search box, I'm going to type left. There it is. Returns the specified number of characters from the start of a text string, start being the left side. So we work left to right. I'm going to double click that. And it's going to say, okay, which text do you want me to look, what cell do you want me to look at? So from this box, I want to look at my zip code right here. And then this numchar, I guess is how you would pronounce it, says how many characters do you want me to count out from the left and return? In this case, it's 5, right? I want a zip code, it's 5 characters. So all I have to do is say 5. And you can see it's already previewing my result right down here, which is going to be just the 5-digit zip code. And I'm going to click done. There it is, 59634. Again, I can make sure I have my little black X by moving to the very bottom corner of this cell reference. See, I go from a white X to a little black X. I can click, hold, and drag that down to the bottom. And now I have a 5-digit zip code, which, you know, if it's just for a mailing address, you may not want that. But if you're looking to analyze, you know, what I do quite a bit with my work is trying to figure out, well, how many nonprofits are in each zip code? How many tax-exempt organizations are in each zip code in Montana? I can't do that if I'm looking at unique zip codes for every single organization. I need to shorten that. So I just have that 5-digit. And that's how I can do that right here by taking this column and using that left formula. Similarly, right, you can probably imagine, does the exact same thing. So let's say that I want to show, you know, I don't want that those suffixes, that dash and 4 digits, to go away. I want them called out as well. I can do the exact same thing this formula is right, and it works the exact same way. So I can type out right, double click that. It says, okay, same, it looks exactly, the formula looks exactly the same. Which cell do you want me to reference? My zip code. How many characters do you want me to reference? Starting on the right side now and working left, I want to show 4. There we go. So that's a good example of how you can start to break up text strings in a way that may be more functional, more useful for you. Now, I get like starting from the right side, and there's probably limited motility to that, limited use. But in your world, you may have a use for something like that, to be able to break up a text string in certain ways. A common way that I've seen this, that I use this quite often, I've seen other people use this quite often, is if I have a full name. So this right here this is a list of our staff, the staff that I work with, our whole team. And I have our full names listed. Most of you may have mailing lists or client lists or customer lists you export out of some other system. And you get a name that looks like this. It's first name space last name, which is, it's fine. But maybe I want to sort that by last name. Or maybe I just want last name for some reason. And I see this quite a bit. And I don't know what to do with it because I've got first name space last name and I can't sort this how I'd like. It's going to get ugly that way. And I want to be able to show, or I want to break up that single cell of full name into first name in one column and last name in another. We're going to show a couple ways that you can do that. One using functions and one using another feature in Excel called text to columns. So I also want to show you this because you can start to see how you can use 2 different functions to accomplish one thing. In this case, I'm going to start here in this left column, column F, and I want to get a column here that just shows first names. I want the entire first name of these individuals right here. So I can use my left function, just like I did before. I can go to my function builder. Formula builder's over here on the right. I'm going to type in left. There it is. And I'm going to say, okay, I want to look at the full name right here. And how many characters do I want to use? Well, in this case, Adam is at the top. There's 4 there, right? So I'm going to type in 4. Move 4 characters and away we go. Awesome. I have Adam. Now I can drag this down. But look at this, as I move down, I start to lose some names. Instead of Michael, I just get M-I-C-H. Instead of Shelby, I just get S-H-E-L because I've set this to be 4 characters only. So I could come in here and for each individual row, change the number of characters, but at that point, I might as well just type it out. That kind of defeats the point of having a formula do this work for me. I need something else, a second step that allows me to get the full name right here. And I'm going to use the second formula called find. Let's get a look at what find does. So in the search over here, I'm going to type in find, double click, and this says the find formula returns the starting point of one text string within another text string. So what it does in essence is it finds a character within a text string, and then it tells you where that character is within that text string. So it's saying find what, so find whatever it is that you tell it to find within a certain cell, and then the start number is starting at, either start at 5 characters in, or the default is to start at the beginning, start at 1. In this case, I wanted to find the space. I wanted to find the space between my first name and my last name and return that space, because then I can use that number to go into the left formula, so that left formula now becomes dynamic. It's going to change depending on how long the first name is. So I'm going to say I want it to find, and literally to find the space, I'm going to go quotes and then space quotes. Anything I put within that quote, those quotes is what I'm trying to find. So I could say, I could type in a name. I could type in a comma. In this case, I just want a space. Quotes, space, quote, I just told Excel, find the space within what? Within this right here, this full name, Adam space Jesperson. And the start number, in this case, I want to start at 1. So start from the beginning. And then click OK. There we go. So now it said 5 because the space was 5 characters in from the left right there. Now I can drag this down and I have, look, 5, 5, 8, 4, 8, 7, 6. Cool. Now I can come back to my left formula, and instead of this number of characters right here being 4, being static, I can change that. And I can say, I want my number of characters to be this right here, this cell, E4, whatever that is. And click done. Now I have Adam. I can move that down. Sorry. Equals E4. There we go. There we go. So now I have Adam, Barb, Kate, Leandra, Liz, Michael, Shelby, Tyler. I have their full name showing up there, not just the four characters that I had called out before. So this is a good example of how you can use two separate functions to build off themselves. And it doesn't matter, I could come in here, let's go down another line. There's nothing here, but I could say, this person's name is Alexander. And I didn't put a space there. Alexander space Smith. And automatically, because I've got these formulas working for me, it's going to identify that the space shows up at 10, and Alexander is going to then show up next. So I built a dynamic formula now, or a dynamic function that doesn't matter how many rows that I'm going to type out here, how many names, it's going to do this work for me. I don't have to do anything else. I just have to copy and paste this formula in, and it's already done. It's built. So you can imagine if you're constantly struggling with how do I separate first name and last name in a formula, this is a great way to be able, or sorry, within a spreadsheet, this is a great way to have this template sitting here. And when you have a new list of names that comes from, your staff in the field or from your database or whatever it is, you can just copy and paste that into this, and it's going to give you that what you need. It's going to give you that response. You have a dynamic formula built. Another way to separate first name from last name, or to separate, any field or any cell, content within a cell. So if it has a space in it or any kind of a common character, you can separate those into multiple columns using this function called text to columns. I can do that right here, but I want to keep this whole. So I'm going to copy and I'm going to paste that over into this right here, so we can get a look at this. And then to use text to columns to separate my first, in this case, my first name from my last name, but if this could be for a mailing address, you want to separate maybe the street address from the house number, or city from a state and zip, or whatever it might be, you can use this text to columns to do so. So I'm going to highlight the cells that I want to separate, and I'm going to go up here to data, the data tab at the top, and then come over here to the right to text to columns. So highlight, data, text to columns. And I'm going to click text to columns, and it's going to bring up a wizard. Convert text to columns wizard. A lot of this, what they say here, kind of, some of these phrases don't make sense, and that's okay. You can just follow the steps, and it's going to get you to the right spot. In 99% of instances, the text that you have is delimited, which is what you want here. So just use the default. Don't worry about this whole fixed width. And I'm going to click next. And now Excel is saying, okay, what is the character within your data that you want to use to separate columns with, to separate the cells into multiple columns with? Again, in this instance, I have a name, first space last. The common character in each of those is the space. You may have other data. Maybe you're bringing something in from another database where that data is separated by a semicolon, or by a comma, or by a slash, or by something else, or by an asterisk, whatever it might be. In this case, my delimiter, the thing that I want to be able to separate my text by, is a space. And I'm going to use that example right here. I'm going to use that option, I should say. So I'm going to check that. And you can see as soon as I do that, I'm starting to get a preview of what Excel is going to do once I click finish. And it's separated first and last name. I could say, you know, my delimiter is the letter A. You can see as soon as I do that, my preview says it finds wherever the A, small a, lowercase a is, and it replaces that A with a new column, creates a new column at that space. I obviously don't want to do that. My delimiter is not an A, but you can see where you can use any character out there depending on what your data is presenting with. In this case, I want to use a space. I'm going to click next. It's going to ask me, how do you want to format these columns? Meaning, do you want it to just show us text? Are there any of these dates? Are they numbers? Whatever it might be. In this case, I'm just going to use general. I can go back and change that if I want to, but in this case, they're just names, so I'll leave it as is. And I'm going to click finish. And notice it replaced, it now took from that exact same place, it replaced my first space last name. And now I have two columns, one with first name, one with last name. I kind of pre-built the titles right here, first and last, just so you can see how that would work. So this is another quick way. If you've got a full name or a mailing address, you want to separate it into its component parts, you can use text to columns as long as there's a common character that separates those bits of text that you want to separate. Any questions on text to columns? Kind of a neat feature. Data, text to columns, follow the prompts, answer the questions. Make sure you've highlighted the text first that you want to separate into multiple columns. Okay. Another text function that I find helpful, that it does the exact opposite of what we just talked about. So we just talked about how do you separate a cell into, you know, multiple cells, multiple columns, multiple rows. This one allows you to take multiple pieces of information, multiple cell references, cell contents, and any other additional characters you want, and slam it all into one cell. The function is called concatenate. I don't know why it's called that. I don't know what the reference is or the meaning is behind that, but it's called concatenate. It's a longer one. And I'm going to go use our formula builder. I'm just going to start typing that in. There it is, concatenate. Join. This function joins several text strings into one text string. So in this case, I want, you know, let's say in this case, I have first name in one column, last name in another, and I want to create a column that is last name, comma, space, first name. I can use concatenate to do that. And I'm just going to go in order. So what's the first cell or first reference that I want to show? It's last name right there. What's the next one? In this case, it's not first name because I have some other characters I have to add. I have to add a comma and I have to add a space. So literally what I'm, for the second text, I'm going to say quotes, comma, quotes, add a comma with nothing else. Next, I want you to add a quote, space, quote, comma, space. Then I want you to add the first name. You can see I'm getting my preview of my result right here, which is Jesperson, comma, space, Adam. You know, you can add, this is where you can add anything you would like. So I could say, I want to add a title here. So I want to do a, let's do a dash. Dash Director of Innovation. That's my title here. Done. Now I've built a whole new cell reference with, or a whole new cell with these references right here. So instead of having to type out their name and a new format that I want, I can just, you know, I'm going to get rid of this title here because that's not going to be helpful as I move down. But I have last name and first name, and you know, this could be 1,000 names long. Once I do that formula once, I can get my little black X in the corner. I can drag and hold to the bottom, and now I have everyone's names now as last, comma, first, which I can use. I can sort this now if I would like. I can do whatever it is that I need to. So if you're making name cards, name tags, something like that, and you need a different format for how their name's showing up, this is a great way to do it. Concatenate. You can manipulate this in whatever way you would like. Some other pretty quick text formulas, functions that I find useful. One's called upper, which you can imagine is it is what it sounds like. It places text all into uppercase. So converts the text string to all uppercase letters. So I'm going to change the last comma first to all caps, last comma first. Right there. Click done. Drag down. Double click up here so it all fits. Same thing for lower. You can imagine what that does. It converts text from whatever case it is in, and it turns it all into lowercase. So we're going to take this all caps, click done. Now the name is in all lowercase. Probably limited utility to that. This one is actually pretty useful, which is proper case. So this will take whatever case your letters are showing up in, whether it's all upper, all lower, or all across the board. If someone did sort of every other letter was in an uppercase. Maybe if you've got someone used a bunch of data entry and you don't necessarily trust the work they did, and it had some mistakes in there, you can use proper case to make everything fit, make everything match, put it into its proper case. So in this case, proper case is the function is proper. Pretty straightforward. And I'm going to do the lowercase version. Doesn't matter which one I use. And I'm back to Jesperson, Adam, where it's going to take the first letter of each word and it's going to capitalize it, assuming that they're all names or addresses or cities or whatever it is that should be capitalized. Hold and drag that down. Now I have it back into proper case. So that, this could be where I'm just going to do as an example, if someone were to type in Jesperson and they've kind of, they were a little bit careless with how they did it, this formula is going to make everything fit, make everything as it should be before you put it on the labels and send out that big mailing to all your clients, all your customers, all your donors, whatever it might be, your whole community. Proper is a good way to sort of double check, and maybe it's already in the right format for the most part, but you can do this proper formula just to ensure that everything's done and right. All right, so those are our text functions. Is there a way to search for a formula in Formula Builder without typing it in? Can you look at a list if you forget? Yes. So if you're on this formula tab, you have some options right here where they try to group functions according to kind of what they do. In this case, text is an entire option. And if I click on this, I start to get this list. Again, it's a long list. But you can click on any of these, or you can show all functions. And from my formula builder, if I click on any of these, you'll notice that the description is down here for what that is. So from my options where it sort of groups it according to what it does, I get the name of them. But I can also come over here and from the formula builder, if I click on any of these, I can start to see what it does. So, there are some very complicated ones that I don't even understand. So let's do bit and. I don't know what that is. Rounds the number up, ceiling, rounds the number up to the nearest multiple of significance. Convert a number from one measurement system to another. So you can kind of get a bit of a description from this. I would recommend, so if you've got some text functions that you need to use, you need to manipulate some text somehow, and you don't know what the function is that you need to use, you can look up here, and these tend to sort of give you at least a little hint of what they do. So you can get a look at what some of these names are, and then come over here and search for it and say, you know, let was one of them that was there. So that you can search for it, read the description, and then decide, well, is that what I wanted or not? Same thing for, you know, I've got logic, which we'll do a little bit of in a little bit, financial, date and time, lookups, and more. You know, there's all of these here. So there are hundreds. I encourage you to sort of, search through here, search by these categories, and then come over here and search for them. Also, Google is your friend. So if you know, you can type in, if there's something you know you need to do, type in Excel function, and then whatever the description is of what you're trying to do, Google can probably figure that out for you pretty quickly. So I would go there first if you're just at a loss for trying to find what it is. Good question, thanks. Any other questions around text-based functions, text-based formulas? We're going to do some logic formulas. So this is using our master list, which again is, you know, it's 11,000 references, 11,000 organizations in the state of Montana. And there's some great analysis, great information to be learned from this, but I got to pull it out. I got to get some formulas to do so. We're going to do 3 here tonight called Countif, Sumif, and then a Vlookup. Countif and Sumif are based off of that if function that we learned last time, which is you're asking Excel, if a certain thing happens, I want you to either count something or add something up. In this case, I want to get a look at, you know, one thing that I'm really interested at from that list is to know how many organizations are in each city in Montana, and then what total income those organizations generate within those cities. So to do that, I first need a list of cities. And a fast way to do that is to copy and paste my whole list over and then remove duplicates, because I don't want 56 Absorkis on my list. I want 1, but I want every single city to show up once on a list. So I'm going to go to my master list example. I'm going to click on E2 right beneath my city title. So the first row of an actual value here. And then remember our shortcut from the other night. If I click shift, if I hold shift, control down, it highlights all references in that column. In this case, it took me from row 2 down to row 11,132, just with one click. Instead of me having to sit there and scroll all the way down, I've just highlighted that entire column. Now I want to copy it. I can right click and copy. In this case, I want to use my shortcut, which is Control C. Once I did that, you'll see that I've got this little blinking, moving dotted line, which tells me Excel got my shortcut and has set the copy this information after has copied it, and will paste it once I decide to paste it. I'm going to come over here to my logic function tab, and right here I want to drop this in. I'm going to do my paste shortcut, which is Control V, or I can right click and paste, or I can go to the home tab and paste from here. But in this case, I want to practice using those shortcuts, so I'm going to go Control V. And there we go. Now I've got all 11,132 city references listed here. I want each of them to show up once. I don't want any more than that. I just want each to show up once. To do that, I'm going to go to data, and right next to text to columns, or I guess one more over, is this button that says remove duplicates. I don't want all 11,132. I just want one reference of each. So I'm going to click remove duplicates, and it says, okay, we found that you have data next to this selection, next to what I've highlighted here. Because you've not selected this data, it will not be removed. Would you like to expand this selection to include everything on the sheet? Or do you want to just continue with what I've currently highlighted? In this case, I want to continue with my current selection, what I've currently highlighted. I'm going to say remove duplicates. It says, all right, which column has duplicate values that you want to remove. And I'm going to select column A. Column A right here has duplicate values. So this could be if I'm on the master list, which has 26, 28, 30 columns, I want to identify which column has the duplicate values. I don't want it to go deleting duplicates all over the place. Just find the column that I want to use to delete. In this case, I only have one because I just pasted it in there. And I'm going to click OK. And Excel says it found 10,787 duplicate values. It found those and removed them, and it left 344 unique values. So I just took out, 90% or more of those values, and now I'm left with one reference for every city that showed up on that list, one and only one. Now I have the start of a table, right? Now I have the start of something I can use and build some formulas to start to tell me some information about these city references. First thing I want to know is how many organizations on that list are in each of these cities. And I'm going to use a formula called Countif. Countif. So we're going to go back to our formula builder. I'm going to type in Countif. I have Countif and Countifs. Countif counts the number of cells within a range that meet the given condition. Notice it says condition, one condition. What's the one argument, the one logic test that you want to do? That's for Countif. Countifs is if you have multiple conditions. And I'll go over that in just a second. We're going to do Countif first. So double click and it says, okay, what's the range that you want Excel to look at to count references, to count how many times city shows up? I'm going to go back to my master list and I'm going to click on that entire column. So I'm going to go up here above all the values until I get that down arrow, and I'm going to click that. So I'm saying, Excel, go look on master list example, on the master list example tab, and look in column E, every single row in column E, all the way down to 1 million or whatever it is that it has. Look in every single row within column E. What am I looking for? I want Excel to look for the city name. So look for Absorki. So in this case, I'm telling Excel, go look in column E on the master list example tab in every row and tell me how many times the phrase Absorki shows up. It's already giving me a preview down here. It's saying 26. So you know I did it right because I'm getting a result, or at least I did something right and getting a result. At least I'm not getting an error. But I'm getting 26 right there. There we go. Now I have, so I know that there are 26 organizations in the city, town of Absorki. From here, I can either click, click, hold, and drag, or I can get this little black X. And because I've got like 344 city names, I don't want to drag all the way down. If I just get right here and I double click, it's going to drop that formula all the way down to the bottom row of data. In this case, in 347. So now with one pretty quick formula and a couple quick clicks, I just got a table that tells me, how many organizations are in every city in the state of Montana. Out of that 11,132, almost 1,000 are in Billings, 731 are in Bozeman. There are 45 in Baker. And if we were to look for Glendive, there's 102 in Glendive. So now that master list example spreadsheet starting to tell me something. Now I'm getting some analysis, some information about it. If I wanted to, and we're not going to do an example of this, but if I wanted to use multiple conditions, I would use a Countifs, which is the one with an S on it. And that might be, so if I were to look back at this master list example, and I would say, Excel, count how many times Absorki shows up in city and how many times 3 shows up in the affiliation. So how many times you have Absorki and 3, it's going to count that. Or how many times you have Absorki and the state of Montana, or Absorki and a certain zip code. If you wanted multiple conditions layered on, you would use Countifs. And frankly, the formula looks exactly the same way as it's built. It just asks you for more criteria as you're building it out. But there's no difference between Countif and Countifs, except for how many arguments, how many conditions it must meet. And it has to meet all of them for the Countifs to return that as a value. So that's Countif. Sumif, you can imagine, is kind of the same, but it's saying, okay, I want you to do exactly the same thing as a Countif. Look at a certain column of data. Tell me how many times a certain reference shows up within that data, and then go to another column and add up values based off of what you find. So it's got one extra step in there. Let's go through what a SumIf looks like and what it does. So we're going to use our formula builder. We're going to type in SumIf. And I have the exact same as Countif. I have Countifs, or SumIf and SumIfs. If I wanted multiple conditions, exactly the same as Countif. SumIf. So in this case, I don't just have two arguments, I have three, because I have to add a sum range as well. So the first two, you'll notice, look exactly the same. What's the range that Excel needs to look at for this to work? In that case, I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at column E, exactly the same as we did before. We're still on city. What's my criteria? It's exactly the same. Look in column E and find all the references for Absorki. But instead of returning and just counting those, then once you find a reference, I want you to go over to, I have an income column right here that shows how much income each of these organizations generates each given year. So look in column E, find the city name, and then go over to the income column and add up all of those. Add up all of these right here. So column Y. And you can see I'm getting results already. I've got my three arguments in here and I'm getting results. Click OK, and that's done. So those 26 organizations in Absorki generate almost $500,000 in income every year. And I can do the exact same thing to copy that down, where I'm going to get my little black X, double click, and now I've got income for all of those organizations in each individual city. So Billings, 1,000 organizations, generates $3.5 billion worth of income annually. Helena, etc., all the way down the line. So that's SumIf. SumIf does the exact same thing as Countif, except it adds that third little piece, which is go look at a different column and add up information from there. So this is, if you have a table that's built like this, you want to start to make it, tell its secrets, start to get some analysis on this. Countif and SumIf are two great ways to do that. Start to get some summary information of what this table shows. This could be again, client list, sales transactions, inventories, anything that you've got a long list that has duplicate entries like this or duplicate values, and you want to start to get some summary information on it. This is a good way to do it. Any questions about those, please feel free to put those into the chat. The last logic formula that we're going to work on tonight is a pretty popular one again. It's called Vlookup. Vlookup, let's just get a look at what the definition of it is. Looks for a value on the leftmost column of a table, this being a table right here, and returns a value in the same row and column you specify. So it's going to look to match a value, kind of like Countif. It's going to look to match a value in a different table. And then it's going to go over the number of columns you specify and then return that value that exists there. So if you wanted to transpose data from one tab, one sheet, one spreadsheet somewhere else, to search through 1,000 records and find the one reference that matches and then return the value somewhere else that matches that, Vlookup is a great way to do that. There are a couple keys to this. One is this description right here where it says leftmost column in a table. Vlookup will only start to look at, for the reference, kind of like the Countif reference, will only look at the data that shows up on the far left side of a table. It won't look at it, sort of in the middle of a table. It'll only look at, you have to match data that's in the far left side. So let's say that, I've got this table right here of cities, orgs, and income. And maybe it's longer, maybe it's harder to get information from that, but I want to be able to transpose some of this information somewhere else. Now, I wouldn't have it just 2 columns over. I'm using this as the example, but this would be where I would have another table somewhere else, and I'm trying to grab information from another place and bring it here. I'm going to use VLOOKUP for that. So we're going to use the VLOOKUP, and we'll show this example. So what's the lookup value what's the thing that I want Excel to look for in that other table that's somewhere else? In this case, it's the city name. It's right here. It's this guy right here, F4. The table array is the row and column location of the table that you wanted to look for absorb key within. In this case, it's right here. It wouldn't be if I was doing this in real life. It would be somewhere else, and probably a larger table where I couldn't just look and see absorb key 26. To get the table array, you need to highlight the entire table. So I could click, hold, and drag, but I want to use my shortcuts. So I'm going to go Shift, Control. I'm going to click at the very top left corner first of the table, and then go Shift, Control, right, and then Shift, Control, down. So I can highlight all the way across and all the way down. Now I have that entire table array highlighted. So right now I've told Excel, find absorb key within the leftmost column of this table right here. Okay, it can do that. And then go over to column 2. Column index number is 2. Go over to column 2 and return whatever value is showing right there that's lined up with absorb key. Again, this is kind of a silly example because obviously it's right there, but it wouldn't be in a real life example. Then this last option is this range lookup, which is either true or false. True. Range lookup is, do you want Excel to find the closest possible match to the reference that you've asked it to find, or do you want it to find an exact match? So this might be if you've got a name and you don't know the exact spelling of the name, but you can get pretty darn close. You might want to say, find the closest match. Or if you've got a number that, it's the number that you're looking for somewhere between 1 million and 1,000,002, you can use that. But in most cases, as a default, you probably want to find an exact match and return that value. True is if you wanted to find a close match. If you type in false here, you're saying, I want you to find the exact match. This is a little bit wonky because if you can also leave this blank and not fill in the lookup, it will default to an approximate match, a close match. Typically, in my history, most VLOOKUPs work best with an exact match. So it's best, as a default, it's best just to type in false for that range lookup and then click done. So now I've told Excel, find absorb key in this table, move to the second row or second column, and return whatever that value is. I double click and I get those results again. Now, if I could come back here and say, I actually don't want the org name, I want the income. So actually, instead of go to column 2, go to column 3. Click done. Now it went to column 3. It went right here and it found that value. And I have those. I'm going to undo that because that's not what my header says. But that's VLOOKUP. To look at the far left column, find the match, go over however many columns you specify, up to 1,000, however many columns of data you have, and return that value, that match in the row that matches the value you're asking it to reference. Does that make sense? And does anyone need to see that again? VLOOKUPs are, again, they're very powerful. When you're looking at large data sets, when you're trying to find that needle in the haystack, where you've got a lot of data and you're trying to sort of transpose the one or two things that you need, you can use VLOOKUP to get yourself there. The key is to make sure that the data that matches your reference is in the far left side. That's your key. So if it's not, you need to copy and paste that column over into the far left side so you can use that as your reference. It's not going to work if it's in the middle of that table array. It has to be on the far left. Okay. I hope we're tracking. I hope this is working for you all. You're a quiet bunch tonight. This is the end of the function work that we're going to talk about. We're going to spend the rest of our time looking at pivot tables and visualizations. Again, with functions, best way is to either know the function you want to use, Google it, search for it, spend some time in there, and then just use the formula builder as a starting place. Follow the steps. Let this do the work for you using these descriptions and the syntax down here. That's the best way to get started with these. All right, go back to our agenda. I'm going to cross some things off. So we reviewed and we went through functions. Awesome. All right, now we're going to talk about pivot tables. Robin asked, when it is an exact match, does case matter? Typically not. Actually, no, I don't think it does. Case doesn't matter. It's just looking for the character reference. Oftentimes, your reference isn't even all text, isn't all letters. It's a number key, or it's some combination of. I have not found that text matters or case matters as I'm looking for an exact match. All right, we're going to look at pivot tables now. A pivot table is a way to do all the work that we just did with formulas, but in a much faster and a much more iterative way. If you get nothing out of this class at all, except for how to build a basic pivot table from using a table like our master list here, that's a win in my book. Pivot tables they seem pretty intimidating and overwhelming when you see how cool they are once they work, but they're actually quite simple to create. If you ever have someone tell you that it takes them 5 hours to build a basic pivot table or whatever it is, just because it looks cool, it looks like it took 5 hours, they're lying. They're quick and they're very powerful. Pivot tables are a way to take aggregate groups of data and start to layer it onto itself in different ways to start to see different summary information. And you can switch up what you're showing pretty quickly. So instead of having to build a bunch of different formulas, you do a bunch of different calculations, it just kind of does the work for you behind the scenes, does the math. Pivot tables work by analyzing a table like this. By a table like this, I mean it has distinct columns of data. Columns of data. Each column has a unique name. There are not multiple, or each columns don't have the same name. There are no spaces between, blank spaces or unnamed columns between any of them. Continuous columns, discrete columns, each of them have their own names. Each of them are formatted how you want. If you get a clean table like this, your pivot table information is going to be, building your pivot table is going to be a lot easier. To build a pivot table, it's pretty straightforward. We're going to go to Insert, the Insert tab up top. This is where we have pivot tables here on the left, graphs and charts over here on the right, some things in between. But we want to insert a pivot table. I'm going to click Pivot Table, and it's going to bring up a pivot table wizard, just like we've seen. First, it's going to say, choose the data that you want to analyze. In this case, if you've got a clean table like this, Excel is going to say, okay, I know what you're trying to do. I see the table. Is this what you want? It's going to sort of pre-populate that. In this case, it got it right. But if it didn't, this is where I would if it didn't autofill that, I would click in here, then I would go out and I would use my shortcuts to highlight this entire table. So I would go to the far left side, go Shift Control right, Shift Control down, and you can see it's doing that for me right here. So I'm looking at A1 to A1 up here, all the way down to AB 11,132. That's my table range, and I can see that it's highlighted with this little blinking line right there. Okay, so that's the data that I want to analyze. Where do I want to place this pivot table? And the default is to a new worksheet. Remember, our worksheets are at the bottom. It's our tabs. So I'm saying build a new tab and put it there. It's a good default, if nothing else. Now I'm going to click OK. Now you'll notice at the bottom here, I have a new tab called Sheet 1. And I have this little box right here that says Pivot Table 3. To build a report, choose fields from the Pivot Table field list. My field list is this guy right here, which popped up for me on the far right side of the screen. On a PC, it may be more of a call out, but it should show up kind of on the right side of your screen. I'm going to close out of that just for a second in case it doesn't show up for you. You'll also notice that when I'm inside, this is my pivot table now right here. It doesn't look like much now, but it will in a minute. When I'm inside this pivot table up here at the top, I have two new tabs. One that says Pivot Table Analyze and one that says Design. You'll notice if I click out of the pivot table just into any old cell, those go away. But when I click back into here, those show back up again. Pivot Table Analyze and Pivot Table Design. Click out, click back in. So now I'm gonna, I went to Insert, Pivot Table, highlighted my table, had it create a pivot table on a new worksheet. So now I'm on Sheet 1, and here's my pivot table. I'm going to go into Pivot Table Analyze. I want to turn that field list back on. This is sort of the nerve center of a pivot table. This is how you make it all work. This is how you do all the work behind the scenes. If it's turned off, if you don't have something over here on the right side of the screen that looks like it should, you can come up here to this field list button. So Pivot Table Analyze, far right side, you see this field list button. I can turn this on and off as many times as I need to, on and off. This right here is how you make all this work. You'll notice I have field names. What do my field names correspond to? They correspond to all of my column names, all of my column headers, right? I have my EIN number, my name, city, street, zip, group, subsection, affiliation, et cetera, all the way down the line. I have all of my column names from my master list example over here. Row 1 are now showing up as options for me to start to analyze and build a table that starts to tell me summary information about what I'm looking at. Beneath that, I have 4 boxes, one for filters, columns, rows, and values. I don't know why they're ordered in the way they are here. The ones that you must use to make this work are rows and values. They should be first, in my opinion. They should be up top. They're down at the bottom, rows and values. And so I want to do kind of the same thing that I just did with formulas. I want to know how many organizations from that master list, how many organizations are in each city. The exact same thing that we use the formula for. So in this case, I'm going to click city. I'm going to hold it. I'm going to click and hold. Now you can see I've grabbed it. I can move it wherever I want. And I'm just going to drag it down to rows. It's there now at rows. And look what my pivot table did. I have the exact same list that I generated before. I have every single city in Montana, or every single city that shows up in that list, listed out once right here. Remember, there were like 345 before, 344, which is what I have right down here, 346 plus a header. So I just grabbed city and dropped it down into row. Now I need a value. I need to be able to count that. So in this case, my value is right here. So all I have to do is take city again and drag it down into values. And I have the exact same thing. I have city for a row, and you'll notice that my values now say count of city. So it says count how many times Abzorki shows up in that list. The exact same thing that we did before. But this was done in 2 drags, 2 drags of a mouse. instead of having to build a formula. So now I have city, and the cool thing about this is now I can start to layer information onto this. So let's look at some other information. So let's do, let me get back to my example here. Let's look at this subsection code. So in nonprofit world, public charities are 501c3s. There are also 501c others, C4, C9, C14, etc. That subsection code is right here. So all public charities are C3s, but there are these other codes. And I want to see how many C3s are there in each city, and how many other C categories are there. So I'm going to go back to my pivot table. I've got that there. And I'm going to grab subsection and drop it down underneath city. You'll notice now that I start to get a hierarchy right here, right? Where I have Absorki, I have, out of those 26 organizations, 19 are C3s, 2 are C4s, 3 C6s, etc. Go down to a larger city, let's look at Bozeman, 731 total, 604 are C3s, 34, etc. You can see down there, but I'm starting to get a hierarchy. I can build in as many layers of this as I would like and show different information that I would like to see. So let's look at, gosh, some of these are tough examples to use. So I have a lot of summary type fields here. Let's say I knew what this classification code was. Let's drop that down in there as well. So let's say classification, let's drop that down in there as well. So now I'm showing a hierarchy of city, C3, and then within those C3s, what classifications are there? The cool thing about this is that I can reorder this in any way I want. So let's say that I want to show, instead of showing city first, I want to show subsection first. Oops, I want to move that to the beginning and then city. So now it's saying, you know, out of all of those 11,132 records, 8,400 are C3s. Out of those C3s, 19 of those are in Absorki, 15 in Alberton, 55 in Anaconda, etc. And then I've got my classification beneath that right there. So I'm starting to get certain information. Now let's do the same thing we layered on before, where we layered on income. I want to see how much income these organizations generate. So that's a value, right? I'm asking it to sum up, add up the values of income. So I'm going to drop that into income right there. Notice it doesn't say count anymore, it says sum, because it knows that that's a numeric field, it's numbers, and it's going to default to adding up the values of those numbers. If I wanted to change that, if I just wanted to count, or if I wanted something else, I can right click on this and go to field settings. Now I'm into the sort of the back end of that field of the sum of income amount. In this case, I want to show as sum, but I want to change the format. So I'm going to go to number. So you can see right now it's just general numbers. I'm going to make it currency because these are dollars and no decimals. Click OK. Okay. And I'm going to get city back onto the top just so we can get a look at that. I'm going to have city move up. So this is the information we had before, right? Absorki has 26 organizations generating about $500,000 in revenue. But within that then, 19 of those organizations are C3s, which generate this much revenue. These are the classification codes and how much revenue those generate. So you're starting to get this layering of information. And as you start to see, man, that tells me something. I wonder about something else. Then I can just reorder if I would like. I can move my subsection back up, move it to the beginning. You know, so I can say that those 11,000 C3s, out of those 11,000 organizations, 8,500 are C3s, which generate $10.3 billion in income every year. And here's where they're located. You can move classification up. You can start to move this data around in whatever way you'd like and start to get some calculated fields of what it's telling you, whether you're asking it to count, whether you're asking it to sum, or there are some other options. Maybe I want to bring income back down here and I want to go to field settings. Maybe instead of a sum, I want an average. Let's see what that does for me. Make this currency so that I can read it better. No decimals. Okay, so now I have my C3s, which generate 10.3 billion in income. The average is $1.6 million out of all those that are there. Or I can do it again and say, you know, instead of just sum and average, I would like a max. What's the max value that shows up in those categories, or minimum, or the standard deviations, the deviation from the mean, the average. You can do all these different options, or you can do a calculation where you want to show the data as a percent of the parent row total. So in this case, I've got some zeros, so it's going to give me some null values, but it's starting to give me, you know, what percentage of the whole is that value? Do some of those values represent? So now I'm starting to get some pretty cool tables that I can use as I'm, you know, making presentations to community stakeholders, or to my staff, or to my boss, or to a board, or whoever it is. I'm using this table and creating a pivot table that has that aggregated data, and I can start to pivot in different ways and start to group it in different ways to show me different information. I use standard deviation. That's right. That was wonky. Go back. Sum. There we go. And from here, you know, I can, if this starts to get busy, I can use this little plus sign to collapse this. Or I can come here and collapse the entire field. So I can make this table as large, as expanded, or as collapsed as I want to be able to show my stakeholders, show who I'm presenting this to, the information that I want them to see. And then we can dive into more information as that is deemed necessary. City back up to the beginning, because that seems to be an easier, cleaner thing for us to look at. And there we go. So we've got a field right here that tells us, you know, just at a glance. Let's look at billings. Almost 1,000 organizations, 3.5 billion in revenue. The average is 4.2. That represents 28% of total revenue for the state of Montana. That's some pretty good summary information that is valuable to me as a stakeholder, someone that works at these organizations. That I was able to get this information just at a glance. Some other fields here that are helpful. So we have, first of all, we have filters and columns. So if I add columns, it's going to take every discrete value, just like city has 344 discrete values. It's going to display those values across as columns. So maybe I want to move subsection over here. It's going to be busy without me taking these away. Remove. It starts to get busy pretty quickly once you add column values on top. I like to just use rows. I could add columns here. So now I have my city name, all my classification codes, and then I can just drop this in here as a value, and it's going to start to do that math for me, which kind of shows the exact same thing we saw, just expanded out in columns instead of rows. I don't like that look as much. Another option, or another category here is a filter, which is similar to what we did when we were filtering that list back on Monday. So I could say, I want to bring in subsection here as a filter. Notice that as soon as I did that, as soon as I dropped subsection down here, I got this little box up top that says subsection all with a drop down. Once I click on it, you'll notice that this looks just like that filter box that we put on that list on Monday, where now I can filter this data by whatever subsection code that I have here. So C3s, I just want to show C3s. These are results just for C3s. Maybe I want C3s, C6s, and C19s. those are showing there. So you can use filters, you can use multiple filters to just show subsections and statuses, you know, certain subsection of those. Another option, instead of using a filter, is to use a thing called the slicer, which is another name for filter, but it's up here. If I go to Pivot Table Analyze, I'm going to move these for now. I'll move my status and move my subsection. And I'm just going to insert a slicer. And a slicer is just like a filter, but it becomes this nice little box that you can click in and out of. In this case, I want to use subsection again as my slicer. So it's saying, what do you want to create a slicer out of? In this case, subsection. And now I get this nice little box right here that I can move around wherever I would like. And as soon as I click into these, it's going to change the data that's showing. So I have C3s. I can select multiple by selecting this and say C6, C1, C4, C5. So I can select which of those options that I want to show over in my pivot table. I can have multiple slicers, and I can have them, you know, selecting multiple things. You can really distill this down into the thing that you want. If you do any work with databases for customers or clients or patients or whatever it is, oftentimes, instead of building a report that tells me something and then having to go back in and build another report that tells me something else, if you can just put all of that data into a table, create a pivot table off of all of that data, then I can create whatever reports I want and slice those up in whatever ways I want to start to get at the information that I need to see. So this becomes a great tool for a staff meeting to talk about, you know, how we're doing in this certain demographic or this certain area or with this certain product, to be able to just look at the data, slice it up, literally with a slicer, and organize it in a certain way to start to tell you what it is you want to see. If I had a date field, date column over here, none of these are dates, but if this was like a transaction report or a donor list or something like that, where I had a date field that said we made this sale for X units on this date, then I could also insert a timeline, which is just like a slicer, where it's going to put this nice little timeline out there, and you can either have it by days, weeks, months, or years, and you can say, just show me the data for 2020, or the first 6 months of 2021, or the first quarter of last year, or whatever it might be. You can use a timeline to, again, manipulate what data is being shown on your pivot table and how that may change over time. But it's all built, pivot tables are all built right from here, right from these 4 boxes. This is my hierarchy of what's being shown and in what order. And from here, you know, if I wanted to understand, you know, my hometown, which of these 19 or what are these 19 organizations in Big Sandy, Montana? Instead of having to go back to this master list, from this point, if I just double click on the 19, it's going to create a brand new tab that has all those 19 records right here. So if you're looking at this report and asking questions and you don't trust the data, or you want to know what makes that up, you can go to your pivot table, find the cell that you want to explode and see all the data on, and double click on it. And it's going to create a brand new tab with all of those fields, all the fields that show up on your master list, but just those records. So now I could come down here and rename this to say, you know, Big Sandy tax exempt organizations. Pivot tables. That was a quick version. I want to make sure we have 15 minutes to talk about graphs and charts. But spend some time with these. Get some data that's in a clean table that you can use and work on building pivot tables. They are incredibly powerful tools that you can use to replace a lot of the other reports and things you spend a lot of time on. At least I spend a lot of time on, and they can make your work a lot easier and pretty fun. If you have any questions, please feel free to put those in the chat. Last thing that we want to talk about for the last 15 minutes is how to make nice, pretty charts and graphs of the data that I'm showing, of my visualization, of my my tables and whatnot. We're going to start with our budget that we built the other day, and we're going to use that to build a graph, build a table, a bar chart, I guess. First thing about visualization, about bar charts, pie charts, any visualizations at all, similar to pivot tables, they work best if you're using clean data, clean tables. And by clean tables, I mean clear headers, columns and rows that are adjoined. It's all next to each other. If you're looking to, to build sort of a table like this, and you have a nice little 2x2 table that has column headers, category names, and clean values, it's going to make your work a lot easier to build visualizations. If you're trying to pull data from multiple places to build something, you can do it, but it's going to be more challenging. I recommend spending the time to clean things up, get everything to one place, and get it into a way that Excel can recognize what it is you're trying to do. Because if Excel can recognize it, it's going to do the work for you. We're going to show you how to do it, but it's going to do that work for you. So to create a visualization, we're going to create a nice little bar chart that shows this budget in visual form. You want to highlight the data you want to show. In this case, I don't want to show the totals. I just want these categories. I want my categories and the months. I'm going to highlight what it is that I want. I'm going to go to Insert. And then over here, kind of in the middle of this area, I have all of these different options for charts, for visualizations. If you know what you want, if you want a column graph, if I click on this, look at all these options. Vertical, stacked, 3D, 2D bar, 3D bar. I have, whatever these are called, my tree map. I have lines, 2D, 3D, all these different formats. I have histograms, pie charts, which we'll make in a second, scatter plots, others like combos. I can make maps if you want to, but for this instance, if you've got clean data, I can also click recommended chart and see what Excel says. Okay, I see what you're trying to do. Do any of these look good? And it's going to do that work for you. Because that's too easy. I'm going to go to my 2D column, and I'm going to do this guy right here, a clustered column chart. Boom, I click that, and I have a chart just like that because I have clean data, because I've got titles, categories, data in the middle. And I have June, July, and August broken out by salary, benefit, rent, office supplies, and travel. If you go to create your chart and it shows something that's wonky, doesn't look right, that's when you can go in and start to select the data that you want to show and tell Excel what to put where. So you'll notice too, as soon as I'm now within this chart, I have new buttons at the top. If I'm outside the chart, it ends at developer. If I click on here, now I have chart design and chart format, just like I had for pivot tables. First off, I have some options here to change. I have some preloaded options to change what I want this to look like. So I could click this and it's going to change that formatting, which just changes color, changes font, changes layout a little bit. Typically, these are kind of they're canned, they're preloaded, and they do pretty well. If I don't get the information that I want to see, I can come up here though to this select data button, and it's going to bring up a prompt that allows me to build this from scratch. This can get kind of complicated, but this is where I can build out my series, build out my Y values, and build out my X values as well. Also look at the range that I'm trying to look at. So you can see that I have options already preloaded in here. I'm going to get rid of a couple of these, and then so I can put them back in. So if you have data that it's not looking like you want it to look like, you're going to have to build it series by series. A series are these little my colors right down here. To do that, I'm going to click this plus, and I'm going to use this wizard just like I use my formula wizard to start to tell Excel what I want where. So the name of this series, following these others, I'm going to follow that down as office supplies. The name is office supplies. My Y values, so that's this guy right here, these values are right here, 100, 100, 100. My X axis, my labels right here are June, July, and August. That's what I want, June, July, August. So I'm just gonna click and hold. And click OK. So you can see I got rid of 2 of those and I just added office supplies back in. Now I want to add the other one in there as well, add travel. So I'm gonna come back here, click this plus. For the name, it's travel. For my Y values, moving up and down vertically, these guys, 200, 250, 300. And my X axis, my X labels are going to be June, July, and August, just like they show right there. There you go. So now I added that series back in. So that's a way, if you're not getting the data you want, you can start up here by using select data and build your series one at a time. What do you want it to be named? What do you want on the Y-axis, which is the value you're tracking? And then what do you want on the X-axis, which is your categories, like months, like in this instance. From here, I can format this even further. So I can add chart elements. So from chart design, I can add certain elements. So you can make some changes to the axes. So I could say, you know, I don't need to see my vertical axis. That's gone. It was already turned on as a default. I can add titles. So add a primary vertical title. In this case, it's going to be budget. And I could do the same thing for horizontal. I already have a title for my chart, which if I want to change the name of this, I could say summer spending by category. I could add labels. So you have options to add them either in the center of each bar. That's what that looks like. It's kind of busy. You could have them within the bar, but towards the top, the inside end. You could have them on the base. That's very busy. You have them outside the end. It's probably your best option for this one. Or you could have them as a call out where they have this little box right there, which is quite busy. From once I get the labels, you know, I usually do this as the default. Do the labels outside end. Should have worked. There we go. Once I have this, you know, I can see that some of these may be overlapping a little bit. I can click on these then and start to move them around. If they're not showing exactly where I want. You notice something happened. Actually, I'm going to finish out my looking at chart elements. I could add a legend. So right now I have a legend at the bottom. I can move that, move it to the top. I can move it to the left, to the right, whatever it is that I want to do, make it go away. If this is a bar or a line graph, I could see a trend line. If I wanted to get a look at that. Grid lines, if I wanted to add more grid lines so I could start to see which line passes where, I can add those. You can see they kind of showed in a very grayed out way. That's how that works. You'll notice so this is how I've built this out now. As I clicked in here once, you notice when I clicked this label, what happened? I clicked this one, but 3 were highlighted. When I click on an area, it highlights the series first. It highlights all 3 first. And then if I click on it again, it just highlights that one reference. So click on this, notice all 3 of these are highlighted. Click on this again, it's just this one. That's important because if I wanted to change colors or change a look, let's say for example, I don't like this gray. So I click on it once and all 3 of these are highlighted. And also I have this box at the far right that says format that series. I can change some colors. So let's say I wanted to fill this with a solid fill color and I wanted to make it bright green. There we go. And then maybe, I wanted to change one instance. So right now I have a whole series highlighted. But if I click in it again, now I just have July of 2021 highlighted. And I want to change the color of that to bright red. because I want to make sure that I call that out specifically as I present this to the client. So click on it once, the series, again, the instance, that one record, that one reference. Same thing for legends, or for labels, I should say. First is the series, the next is the instance. So maybe I want to change this to text options and make it red, just for that one. So I can start to format, make this look how I want, change colors, change labels, make this work once I've sort of got the base built. Your preloaded options are usually pretty good in Excel for getting stuff that looks nice, that looks like something that you can plug into a PowerPoint and away you go. The big thing is if you're not getting the data you want, to use select options to change that. I want to show how to build one more. We're going to build a pie chart. So this is good if you, a clustered bar graph like this is good if you have multiple series, multiple months. If you just want to look at one series, 1 month, oftentimes a pie chart is a good way to do that. So in this case, I want to highlight 1 month. That's because I'm going to use June. Go to Insert. And for recommended charts now, you'll notice that one of my options is a pie chart. So I could use that. That'd be great. Or I can go down to this pie chart options and I have 2D, this guy, a 3D, whatever, a donut, whatever it might be. I'm just going to use the silly old 2D pie chart right there. And I've got a mess. Something happened. I have June 21 and I'm just showing salaries. I'm not showing anything else. So that means I need to come in here and start to build out some series. They're all there. What's going on here? One thing that I can try, sometimes Excel doesn't know exactly what you're trying to do, but you can use this switch rows and columns, which switches my y-axis and my x-axis, and that might kind of jog it loose. In that case, that's exactly what I needed. So it was just showing June as my values, and then it was showing June as my x-axis, and then all the values as a sum, just as 1. But as soon as I switch that, now I get something here. I get something that makes more sense to me. That's what I wanted. So sometimes if it doesn't look right, come up here and do this switch rows and columns. Maybe Excel just has it backwards. You can also see different information by switching rows and columns. Like for here, I'm showing categories by month right now. If I switch rows and columns, now I'm showing categories here, month by category. It's different information. It looks different. It tells you something different. And I can switch, just toggle back and forth and see different information. Here I can go here, switch. That's what I want right there. That's what I need. And now I can come in here and I can add different chart elements like labels, either in the center, inside the end, outside the end. For a pie chart, you also have a best fit option. Because the pie chart, you often have like little narrow slices of the pie. So if you use best fit, it's typically the best option, where it's going to put some inside and some outside, depending on the size that you have. Visualizations. There are a ton, kind of like formulas, there are a ton of options that you can use. I recommend starting with your recommended charts. This is usually going to tell you if your data is clean, it's going to get you pretty close. If it's not, then you can start to look at some of these other options right here for different variations of what it is that you might want to see. If you get in trouble with any of these, start with select data. If it's not looking right, you can always change the type. So if I have this and I decide, well, that's not really what I wanted, I'd rather have this be 3D as an option, or maybe let's turn it on its side. I can do that. So you can change the chart type just on the fly. Last thing, I know we're at 7:30. Once I get a graph, a chart that I like, that looks good, I want to put it into a PowerPoint, or I want to put it into an email, or I want to put it into a PDF. Then I have some options, or I want to just put it on a different sheet to display. I could just copy and paste. I could highlight this, Control Copy or Control C, or right click copy. and I could paste it where I want it, Control V. But you'll note, and once I do that, you can see that I can still manipulate this. I just created a copy, but I can still edit and change and do what it is that I want. Another option, if I have it exactly as I want it to look, and I don't want to mess with it anymore, or anyone else to mess with it, I can right click and go paste special and paste as a picture. Now I have something that's flat, meaning if I click in this, I can't change anything anymore. It's set, it's locked. It's now a static picture that I can move and put anywhere. I don't have to worry about someone else down the hall coming in and accidentally changing something, or just opening up in something else and having it look different. I have it how I want it. It looks good. And I can paste that as a picture. Now I can copy and paste this into a Word doc, into an email, into a PowerPoint. It's set. It's how I want it. That was the last thing I wanted to show on of those. Okay, we're at past 7:30. Went a little bit over tonight. What questions do we have about visualizations? Again, these are fun. This is where Excel gets to be fun because you can really start to make stuff look nice and present in a way that shows the data you want to see. The architecture of these is the same. The structure is the same on how they're built. Get your data that's clean. Go to select data. If it's not looking right, use switch row column. If it's not looking right, and then you can build out your series using the select data by actually selecting the legend series, selecting the y-axis, selecting the x-axis, and then making, once you've got your data how you want it, making changes to your titles, your labels, etc. Okay, yeah, Lisa said pivot tables are new to me, but I can see how they're powerful. One last, I know I'm over time, but one last thing I want to show. It's going to be a little bit busy because my data is not set up super well for it. From a pivot table, you can easily create a chart that corresponds to the pivot table, a visualization that shows to the pivot table. So from here, once I'm within my pivot table, I can still just go to insert a chart. It's going to be busy because there's 344 records. And I've got all 344 visualized. And this is a dynamic chart that's going to change as I change this data. So if I just show C3s, this is going to change right in real time with me. So that was the last thing. The chart formatting will be exactly the same, but you can start to create interactive visualizations with a pivot table. That's it. I'm done.
Awesome. Any other questions for Adam? Okay.
Thanks for bearing with me tonight. I'm going to send this completed exercise file to Dara. So she will have it. She'll send it out to you. And yeah, you can use it. You can use it to learn how to do some of these tips and tricks.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Adam. And thank you all of you for hopping on twice with us this evening in some cases. If you have any suggestions for other trainings you may like to see, you all have my email now. So shoot me your thoughts. And otherwise, I will send out the link to this recording in the next day or so. All right. Have a nice evening, everyone.
Thank you all. See ya. Stay safe.